Don't give me those crazy looks.
Why you preface to not have crazy looks?
Why I said we go 5, 4, 3, 2.
Good evening and welcome to the Drive at 5 on IntellectualRadio.com/iHeartRadio station. I'm your host Roman and we have a good show planned for you today. But first, the forecast from our IntellectualRadio.com Weather Center. Today, a thick cloud cover all over Chicago with a couple of showers here and there. High 49 degrees. Tonight, partly cloudy, low 37 degrees. Tomorrow, some sun here and there. High 48 degrees tomorrow night. Partly cloudy, low 28 degrees. The rest of the week forecast looks like this. Wednesday, cloudy with partial sunshine, high 37 degrees. Cloudy on Thursday, high 47 degrees. And on Friday, warmer with a shower or two, high 63 degrees. The Drive at 5 is also part of the Monday Night Mogul with One Sister to Another with your girl Angela at 4 p.m. Straight No Chaser with your girl Rhea Ray Harris at 6 p.m. New Black Leadership at 7 p.m. and May Says with Mace Jackson at 8 p.m. The Drive at 5 is also part of the fabulous 5 at 5 only on IntellectualRadio.com. See, you got me all discombobulated here. Today, my guest is the Cook County State's Attorney. Please give a welcome back, Drive at 5. Welcome to Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx. Welcome to the Drive.
Thank you for having me back.
Last week marked your first 100 days in office. What changes you have made since you have been in office to establish trust to the state's attorney's office in the communities that have been affected with police misconduct?
Certainly, we've done quite a bit in the first 100 days. First and foremost, we hired our first ethics officer to ensure that our attorneys are operating at the highest level of ethics and integrity. That's important as we try to reestablish trust because it ensures that our attorneys know where the balance is in terms of prosecuting cases, but doing them in a way that is morally upright and in accordance with the law. That also cuts down on wrongful convictions when you know what your rules are and you train around that from the beginning, and having that ethics officer does that. Secondly, as it relates to wrongful convictions, we exonerated 4 people in the Marquette 4 case, a case in which 4 people were convicted of a double homicide back in 1995. The case wound its way through court. They had been convicted, gone up on appeal. We got the case back. My predecessor had decided to continue to try the case. Our office reviewed those convictions, went through them with fine detail, and determined that we could not prosecute those cases, and those men were released. Additionally, we worked on bond court reform. What we found was that we had a number of people, particularly poor people, people of color, who were in jails for crimes or alleged crimes, not yet gone to trial, but couldn't get out, not because they were a threat to the public, but because they couldn't afford to pay their bond. And so we worked with the Sheriff's Department and the Public Defender's Office to come up with a way to let people on low-level bonds out and await for their trial on an I bond. Additionally, we worked on police accountability. We've had 2 cases that have come before our office involving officer-involved shootings. In 2 of those cases, we were able to charge first-degree murder charges, one within 14 days and the other within 9 days. What we did differently than my predecessor was we didn't wait for the administrative hearings, the administrative process to finish before we conducted our own investigations. And in doing so, ensuring the public that we were treating those cases in the same manner that we would treat someone who was not in law enforcement who was charged with similar crimes. Additionally, we've hired a chief diversity officer to make sure that our workforce, particularly our management force, is reflective of the communities that we serve. We now have one of the most diverse executive staffs of prosecutors' offices in the country. We've tripled the number of African-American men in senior leadership positions in the office. And we have been going out on listening tours throughout the county to make sure that we are talking and listening to people and their concerns about the criminal justice system. So that's 100 days in a nutshell.
What are some of the measures you would like to implement in your administration right now?
So like I said, we're still continuing. So that first 100 days is the drop in the bucket of broadening out those measures. So a robust conviction integrity unit, making sure that the unit that reviews cases of possible wrongful conviction is operating in best standards. Bond court reform, we've worked to get low-level bond folks out, but that's just a Band-Aid to a bigger issue. So we want to continue to make sure that bond court reform is meaningful and long-lasting. We still want to work on juvenile justice issues. We have a new head of our Juvenile Justice Bureau. We want to make sure that young people who are coming to our system actually deserve to be there, as opposed to kids who have discipline issues that could be dealt with outside of the criminal justice system. We want to still continue to make sure that our office prosecutes cases that belong in the criminal courts, and again, not cases that should be diverted out. So we're working on broadening diversion for drug offenses, particularly those who are drug addicted. We're continuing to work on mental health courts and broadening our efforts to have those who are suffering from mental health issues steered out of the courts and into treatment. So those are our long-term initiatives. Where we started in the first 100 days is to start the ball moving, but I think a more fair and just criminal justice system incorporates all of that and doesn't happen overnight. And we are well on our way to making sure that we can see that change.
You mentioned Marquette 4 earlier in your statement. Can you give IntellectualRadio.com/iHeart radio station listening audience what was the case back then? Because a lot of people probably is not familiar with Marquette 4.
So it's a case, I think it started in 1995, in which there was a double homicide, a man and a woman who were killed. Young men, and I say young because they were juveniles at the time, 15, 16 years old, who were charged in that case. And what ended up happening was there were some confessions. There was a couple of confessions that were given, and they were coerced confessions. But we weren't able to determine that they were coerced confessions until later. Like after a while, one said, look, I really didn't do it, but had given a signed confession saying that they did. What happened was there was DNA evidence, fingerprints that were obtained from inside of the vehicle that did not belong to any of the people who were charged with the case. In fact, those fingerprints came back to someone else who had a history and who happened to be around at the time. In doing further digging in the case, it was determined that the alternate person whose fingerprints were in that vehicle was the person who committed the crime. But because there had been a confession, there was a reluctance to undo the convictions by our predecessor, because the belief that someone would confess to a crime they didn't commit didn't resonate. But what we know, what we've seen over the past several decades, what the science has told us about what would convince someone to confess to a crime that they didn't do, and to look at all the elements together, we determined that we were not going to pursue that case, that we believed that those men were wrongfully convicted.
That brings me to my next question. Last week, Cook County Chief Judge Timothy Evans signing an order granting access to an attorney at no charge for people taken into Chicago police custody. Again, some people have been pushing for this type of order for some time now. Others say it is a political move because he is being challenged for the chief judgeship. What are your thoughts regarding the order granting access to an attorney if if someone is taken into custody? Some people say it's long overdue. Others people saying that is it political or?
So Chief Judge Evans won his last election. It's a 3-year term. I think he won that last September. And so I think it was not a political move, but long overdue. In the press release that the Chief Judge's office released, we gave a statement in support. And that matters. Historically, defense attorneys have been pushing for access for lawyers, for defendants, or those who are being detained or potential defendants for a long time. There's a model out of Seattle that's been in place for 10 years. Because the belief is the earlier access you have to an attorney, the less likely you are to confess to something that you didn't do. The less likely you are to have wrongful convictions when people have early access to attorneys. Our office as prosecutors, again, I don't believe that we should deprive anyone of their constitutional right. You have the right to counsel. And I don't believe that you should withhold that right until after bond court. So our office was happy to provide support in the press release, reaffirming our commitment to making sure that people's constitutional rights are followed.
So, in essence, you're saying you're in full support of it.
Yes.
But why it's taking this long for an action to be made on this?
I think we have a really big jurisdiction, and it's not just here in Cook County. Other jurisdictions across the country have grappled with using resources that are available to give people counsel. Public defenders are generally assigned after you've been found to have been indigent, but you aren't found to be indigent until you go before a judge. So being able to have, if we have 200 arrests or 150 arrests a night, the personnel and the staffing to go out to the police districts to be able to give representation is tough, particularly in a big jurisdiction like this. And I think when someone says, I want an attorney, to have access to an attorney, so the Legal Assistance Foundation and others are helping to be a part of this effort, taking it out of just the public defender's office and having that network helps. So I think it's a logistics issue. I think it's the will of the people to make sure, particularly here in Cook County, that our convictions are sound, and making sure that people have representation gets to that. But I don't think Cook County sits as an outlier to other major metropolitan areas. Like I said, I know Seattle has a similar model, but if you look in New York or Los Angeles, we are ahead of the game compared to them with this initiative.
What are some of the noticeable changes people should be aware of from your administration?
Like I said, one, we have a way more diverse or largely more diverse staffing in our executive levels.
In comparison to your predecessors. Okay.
So we have, as I said, diversity, whether it's from our chief of staff to our head of our civils bureau. We have our first ever chief diversity officer in place to make sure that we're maintaining diversity standards throughout the organization. In our juvenile justice bureau, we've gotten, I think that's the most diverse of our bureaus. Our deputy in our criminal division, which is our largest division, is an African-American woman. So I think from a visual standpoint and looking at the senior leadership, our senior leadership team is one of the most diverse senior leadership teams that this office has ever seen. And again, I go back to the initiatives around bond court. That is a completely different look, having state's attorneys advocate for I-bonds for low-level offenses, and also going back and asking for the release of people who've been in jails. That has never happened in this office before. Again, expanding out on the conviction integrity unit. We have Ron Sullivan, who is a professor from Harvard, who designed the conviction integrity unit for the Brooklyn DA's office, who's working with us to design our unit, which is vastly different than how our predecessor did it. So, the first 100 days, again, 2 police officers charged with first-degree murder within weeks as opposed to months or years is vastly different than how my predecessor did it. So I think the first 100 days is a reflection of the path that our office is taking that has not been taken before.
In essence, you're saying you're setting new grounds and new ground rules.
Yeah, I think the ground rule should have always been that we're here to seek justice, not simply convictions. And I think every prosecutor across the country, whether you're the lead prosecutor or a line prosecutor, your job is to seek justice. How we've defined what justice looks like has been different than others. Taking a real hard look at what are things that we can do. The bond court initiatives, public defenders have been fighting this fight for a long time. The issues around access to lawyers, public defenders have been fighting for that. But as prosecutors, if we want to seek justice, we want to make sure we got the right people in for the right crimes. That means that we have to get involved too. So I think that's where some of the biggest differences have been, is that we've gotten off the sidelines, and that's something that they're waiting for something to happen before we get involved.
Guns was one of your platforms, the most important issue in Chicago, and now we know where the gangs are getting their weaponry from, stolen off of Union Pacific freight trains. Senator Dick Durbin last week wrote a letter to Union Pacific stating more security at the rail yard. Union Pacific stating it needs tougher penalties from your office. in order to curb the problem of the railway weaponry theft. What is your response to the Union Pacific saying they need tougher penalties because, they're treating it as a petty theft or...
Yeah, listen, it is more complicated than Union Pacific is explaining. The issue is that we have a large number of guns that are being taken off of freight trains, which are interstate commerce. So those are federal issues. So federal prosecutors working with local prosecutors have to work on this together in partnership with the ATF and other organizations, which is what we're doing now. The prosecution of gun crimes from federal prosecutors here in Illinois has been ramped up over the last couple of years, but there's more that can be done. Looking at penalties from the state level, that's not where the meat is. It's a federal prosecution issue. But we are working, particularly around gun crimes, with our partners in the U.S. Attorney's Office, the DEA, FBI, ATF, and the U.S. Marshal's Office on a collaborative effort dealing not just with gun possession cases, but also dealing with gun trafficking cases. So it's not about pointing fingers. I think the reality is that we all have to do more. And we're working with our federal prosecutors to make sure that we're doing just that. But the Union Pacific folks also, there's concern about liability if someone is shot from a gun that has been stolen from one of their trains. And so I think that makes it easier to point fingers as to why things aren't happening. There's an obligation that they have as well when they have dangerous freight going through communities to secure those trains as well. So I think it's a joint effort that we all have to do and not absolve anyone of their responsibility. But the U.S. Attorney's Office also has taken a game.
Plenty of times I ask this question, why not create an ordinance or some type of legislation or a penalty against Union Pacific to say no rest stops in high crime areas?
That is, I think Danny Davis and others have been proposing that for a while. That is federal legislation because again, and again, I'm trying to figure out how to say it without overly complicating it. Interstate commerce and the oversight of railroads is not simply a local issue. It is a federal issue. So we need our federal partners to help with that type of legislation because even though they roll through Chicago, they also, which has home rule, they also roll through Broadview, they also roll through Flossmoor, which also has different home rule rules. So that is a federal legislative package that would need to happen to ensure continuity of how that law is administered.
Will there be a letter of response from your office to talk about more security as well as tougher penalties in order to curb the theft of weaponry?
I haven't seen their first letter to respond to, so I can't say that there would be a letter of response because I have not received that. My assumption is that is a letter that was referencing the U.S. Attorney's Office. If we are in fact referenced in that, then we would respond, but I have not seen that.
What is your hope that lawmakers would do in order to effectively prosecute people or person of interest who commits a crime using automatic weapons? Because you're saying earlier, you're following the law.
Yeah, I mean,
the letter of the law, and people have the right to basically, be represented by an attorney.
That's right.
However, that's not what's going on in Chicago. What would you like to see as people who are being prosecuted and they're committing crimes using automatic weapons? Because let's say a semi-automatic weapon, if somebody commits a crime with a semi-automatic weapon, may be different from a 45.
Now, look, if you kill somebody, whether you use a semi-automatic, 45, a knife, a bat, a death is a death. I mean, I think we have to hold people accountable who use weapons, period. The nature of the weapon, if it is used to hurt, harm, or kill, the whatever caliber, doesn't matter. I mean, at the end of the day, the death certificate says homicide by a gunshot wound. And our statutes aren't built to say, well, what kind of gun did it? I mean, our office is committed to making sure that those who cause harm to the community are held accountable for the harm that they cause. Now, we know that automatic weapons are illegal here in Cook County, that those who are trying to engage in the purchase of automatic weapons are not using them for hunting purposes here. And so we have to be diligent about going after those who are trafficking in those weapons because we know their intended use. But I want to caution against looking at the type of weapon, because we have a lot of young people in neighborhoods with smaller caliber weapons who are using them and missing intended targets, hurting bystanders, not with automatic weapons. And so anytime someone uses a weapon of any nature to cause harm to another, they need to be held accountable.
Well, you, as Cook County State's Attorney, what would you like lawmakers to do in order to make...
I don't need lawmakers to do my job. My job is to make sure that, one, we prosecute people who, we have laws on the book already. I think part of what we have to make sure that we're doing is adhering to the laws that we already have. There's always this constant need to like add more, do more. No one's asking the question, what are you doing with the laws that are on the books right now? Are you applying the laws fairly? Are you going as aggressively as the law allows you to do so now? And so for me, I'm not looking for lawmakers to tell me how or what else I need from them. I'm looking for me and my office to make sure that we're using every tool and resource that we have available to us now and prosecuting the cases, again, that need to be prosecuted to the fullest as hard as we can. The problem is we have a lot of people in our jails and a lot of people who come before us who are there for example, drug possession cases. We do a really good job of making sure we're prosecuting people for possessing low-level amounts of drugs. Those aren't the people who are keeping us up at night. Right now, our homicide closure rate in the city of Chicago is less than 30%. That means of 100 people who are killed, they're only able to solve 30 of those cases. That means 70 people who are out there having caused harm to someone are out there. I want to be able to work with our partners in the community to help them come forward to identify those who have caused harm. And then I want to be able to use our resources to make sure that we're punishing people who harm others. And so I'm not absolving legislators of their jobs, but in law enforcement, I have to do mine. And right now I have a large portfolio of things that I could be doing. I can't do them if the community is not willing to work with me, if the community doesn't believe that they have a partner that they can trust in the prosecutor's office because of past histories. Lawmakers can't fix that. The way we fix that is by showing and proving, showing up, being there for community, showing them that we believe in fairness, justice, and equity, and then delivering on the promises of justice. And so I can't push that on someone else. That's a responsibility of our office.
Anita Alvarez recently had an interview with CBS 2, and she said she had a bum rap. She constantly says she had a bum rap. And she also mentioned her opponents kind of slandered her. Your response to what she said previously on CBS 2 News?
Listen, I am very grateful to the voters of Cook County who came out and voted for me, both in the primary and the general election. That's what elections are for. The people have a voice in who they want to have represent them. And the people made that choice. And so I'm honored, humbled, and it's a privilege to have been served, to serve the public and having been chosen by the people of Cook County. I can't answer for her as to why she believes that she lost. I can only be thankful for the votes that I received.
Curfew is a problem as well. Last weekend, a question was asked regarding making May Curfew Awareness Month to parents at Cook County Commissioner Richard Boykin's forum in his district. The measure has passed last year, however, no implementation to notify the community about the Curfew Awareness Month. What your office plans in assisting, because you said you want to assist the Cook County resolution and informing the communities regarding Curfew Awareness Month?
So one of the things that I'm also very proud of is that we have revamped our website and our social media channels so that we can use the resources of our office to amplify the work that is being done, as well as to amplify initiatives that are taking place. So we will use our channels, our website, our social media channels, and our outreach teams to amplify the work of Curfew Awareness Month.
Now, the Chicago Sun-Times, in an opinion piece, mentioned your name, Kim Foxx.
That's me.
They said that you're loud and tough talk with compassion. Now you must deliver. Your response about what some critics are saying about all talk, however, no substance in delivering. Can you respond to that opinion piece?
I read that opinion piece and she said we were off to a good start because we were delivering on those initiatives. So I'm thankful for Laura Washington and her belief in our ability to get that done. I think what she was saying in that article was comparing what was happening in Washington, D.C. to what we were doing here in Chicago. And she said in 100 days, we were in our honeymoon phase, but she was impressed by the work that we've already gotten done. And I am, again, committed to doing that. What people in elective office have to do is show and prove. We've been here 100 days, and in 100 days, I have a number of initiatives that I can show a demonstrable difference between where we were on November 30th and where we are right now. And so we will continue to do that. My goal for the voters of Cook County is to make sure that we enhance public safety and that we're fair and just. And I think our record would be able to show that.
Some critics are saying they are disappointed in some of the court rulings. The most recent was the police officer who was shot and killed, Quintonio Greer, and Betty Jones was found not guilty. According to the Associated Press, the Cook County State's Attorney's Office said insufficient evidence to prove the officer, Robert Riamo, had acted in self-defense. Prosecutors say they would not charge the officer. Many people say why. And if the evidence, the eyewitness accounts, and federal documents that some people say he was lying says otherwise. So what's going on with the case?
So the case he wasn't found not guilty, he wasn't charged. So the state's attorney's office did not charge in that case. I personally recused myself from that case because I work for the law firm that represented Betty Jones and her family while I was running for office. But I want to be clear, I'm supportive of the rationale that was made for not charging in that case. When I say that the state's attorney's office, as a prosecutor, we take an oath to uphold justice, we only bring cases, or we should only bring cases in which we have a good faith belief in the charges that we're filing. And the law, as I try to explain about, rail yards and how cars go through rail yards, is complicated, whether you're talking about that or you're talking about murder. Let me give you an example. There was a case a few weeks ago in which someone had been charged with first-degree murder who was released from jail because our office had to drop the charges in that case because he did not have his trial in the 120 days that was required by the law. And right after he got out of jail, he was killed. And there was a lot of controversy because people were like, well, how did he get out? What happened? Why would you let someone who was charged with murder out on a technicality? And the law says that someone has a right to a speedy trial. It's a constitutional right that we have. And what happened was, under my predecessor, that time period had passed. And because that time period passed without him having that trial, we could not prosecute that case. We had to drop murder charges in that case. And again, people didn't understand, well, he did it, he thought he did it, and this somehow doesn't seem fair. The law and common sense don't necessarily add up. We have to follow the law. In the Riamo case, law enforcement and regular citizens have the right to defend themselves from imminent harm. Police officers have the right to use deadly force. in that case, there was, a lot of, it's undisputed that there were 3 calls that were made by Quintonio LeGrier that night, and 1 call by his father. Undisputed that one of those phone calls, the father said that he was trying to come into his room with a baseball bat. It's undisputed that when they arrived on the scene, that the young man had had a baseball bat in his hand. What we have to determine in looking at the law is, did the police officer in that moment reasonably believe that his life was in danger? If he did he have the right to exercise self-defense? If he had the right to exercise self-defense, then use deadly force, which was his weapon. Even if he shot Ben Jones, the law says that intent travels to the bystander who was hit. So based on that, the law and the facts, and people will differ. People have an oath to take as prosecutors. Even in cases, like I said, where we knew had been charged with murder, but the law says we had to let go. In cases like this, where even if we feel like, it doesn't seem right that this person is not going to be held accountable with murder, I can't charge someone with murder because the public is outraged. I have to charge someone with murder because the law demands that I do so. And that's what happened with that case. And I understand that it's controversial. I understand that people question, well, how do you charge a murder here and not a murder there? And again, it's my obligation as the state's attorney to explain it, because these are complicated issues. And lawyers, we tend to talk a lot, and people are like, well, what does that really mean? But we still have an obligation to talk about it. But just because it outrages folks, I can't prosecute cases based on public opinion. I have to prosecute cases based on the law.
Even though some people are saying that, okay, 1 minute it shows he didn't swing a bat, the other one shows.
And that's the other part, right? The lawyers on the case, have volumes of documents. The public sees snippets. I can't argue with snippets. That's dangerous. It's dangerous when folks who don't have the same access to the same level of information. There are things about that case that I know that the public doesn't know, that the family knows and the prosecutors know, but I'm not litigating in the media. That's not how we do this. That's not fair. So when you say even though, based on snippets and not the whole file, I can't fight that. There's not a back and forth with that. What I can tell you is that I have an obligation as the chief prosecutor in this county to only bring charges in which I believe we have a good faith basis to do so. When I don't, I will issue, like we did in the Betty Jones case, or the office did in the Betty Jones case, a memo to our website outlining our obligations, what the law says, what the facts were, and what the evidence were, so that people could challenge it. Everyone has a right to challenge and disagree, but you'll know where I'm coming from. And that was a 4-page memo based on thousands of pages of documents. But I can't relitigate that. The lawyers for the families, Mr. LeGrier's family, Ms. Jones' family, will continue to litigate that in their civil suit against the city of Chicago and Chicago Police Department. And there will be further information that comes out with that. But I don't think it is a fruitful exercise for me as the top prosecutor, having shared that information, to debate that without those having the benefit of the full case file. I don't think that gives a full and complete picture.
Last time you were here, we discussed the FOP contract negotiation. I know you're smiling. You know where I'm headed.
Yeah.
That you would like to be part of that discussion, even though it's not in your jurisdiction. Will you ask city officials, maybe in an open letter, to be part of that negotiation, to put measures in place for police misconduct?
I think I've had conversations with city officials about the FOP contract and the concerns that we have from the prosecutor's office on some of the provisions in that contract that sometimes stymie our investigations into misconduct and accountability. And so that is widely known. I've had conversations with Lori Lightfoot, who heads the Police Review Board as well. You know, my sense is that this is going to be a very interesting contract negotiation period between the FOP and the city. And I would imagine that there would be some reticence to have me participate in that. I haven't decided on how to push that just yet, given that I am not a primary part of those negotiations. I'm trying to find a diplomatic way to make sure that the concerns that we have, again, in ensuring a fair process for law enforcement, because I think we should not come from the assumption that, you know, we want to somehow take away folks' rights. I think we have to ensure everyone's rights are acknowledged and are fair, but to somehow address some of the concerns that we have on our ability to do investigations.
I know we're running out of time as promised, but you don't mind staying a little bit longer, right?
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. See, I did ask. Governor Ronner signed a bill last week to rehabilitate prisoners and expand probation. That's basically what you are asking for. You, as well as others, been asking for this type of bill for a long time now. Do you think it's long overdue, and how so?
Yeah, absolutely, it's long overdue. Listen, we have a number of people who go into our prison system who are coming back out. 90% of people who go to prison are going to get released eventually. You know, that small handful of people who will serve life without parole will be there forever. When people come out of prisons, what we want to do is make sure that they are able to successfully reintegrate into society. That's to everyone's benefit. That is what enhances public safety. People who come out who have the inability to get jobs because of a felony conviction, the inability to get housing, to get educational grants or scholarships, to be able to participate in a way that will make them upwardly mobile. If we don't give them that chance, the likelihood of them recidivating and coming back into our prison system is high. So we can't afford to not invest in rehabilitation. We can't afford to not invest in making sure that people who come out don't go back. I mean, our history has taught us, when we look at some of our neighborhoods that have the highest levels of violence, they also have a high concentration of people who come back from our prison institutions, who also have the highest unemployment rates, who also are living in concentrated poverty. Thinking that the prison system is somehow going to make us safer alone without investing in the people who come in and come out will continue to be chasing the same circles. So we absolutely have to invest. It is long overdue. I think we've seen the destruction of communities where we have large folks returning who have no opportunity, that we have to do better.
This was breaking last week, and I want your opinion.
Okay.
Now, even though this is a national issue, it's a heavy Chicago connection. According to the Guardian.com, U.S. Attorney Chicago top prosecutor Zachary Barton, forced to resign last week for the Trump administration. He have given Chicago a stern warning, basically saying that Trump policies will position Chicago residents as the enemy. He written a 5-page letter for his recommendation. In the letter, Barton gave to local reporters a memo analyzing the causes of Chicago's increase in murders, citing social media and games targeting social media and game baiting on social media. Now, Cook County Commissioner Richard Boykin passed a resolution on developing a social media game task force. First question, did you get a chance to see the letter of the U.S. Chicago Attorney Zachary Barton? And as well, your involvement in the Cook County Social Media Gang Task Force.
Yes, I did see the letter after it was published. And the social media task force, I'm not aware. We were not consulted as part of the task force initiative. We certainly would be willing to share the work that we're doing on using social media as a way to drive intelligence, particularly for a lot of the gang violence. We were fortunate enough in our first month to have prosecutors from New York, from the Manhattan DA's office, who have an intelligence unit within their office, particularly around social media, come and train some of our assistants so that we can be more proficient and looking at these social media channels and getting information to help us try to stop crime before it starts, looking at beefs as they're building up and trying to intervene earlier. So we would certainly be welcome to share the information that we've gathered with that task force, but I'm not aware of the task force.
Would you contact Boykin's office to make sure that
Absolutely
happens? The reason is that a lot of people said there was so much meat in a 5-page memo. Have you reached out to Zachary?
Zachary Park?
Yeah.
Since his departure, no. I mean, Zachary and I have worked together in the 3 months that I've been state's attorney, a little more than 3 months, and he was U.S. attorney. We worked together rather regularly. So the concerns that he raised in his letter were concerns that he and I had talked about during both of our tenures there. It's why we worked together to create a unit within our office, our gun crime strategies unit, which places our assistant state's attorneys with U.S. attorney, assistant U.S. attorneys in police districts in the 7th and 11th district, on the ground together, working with our partners in CPD, as well as U.S. or FBI, DEA, ATF, and the U.S. Marshal's Office, building gun cases from the very beginning. So that was an initiative that he and I and Police Superintendent Johnson started working on back in December, that we were able to get off the ground in early February. And so a lot of the things that he's talked about around addressing violence, we have been working on together. So there was no need to reach out to him afterwards to talk about the letter, because again, these were things that we've talked about all along.
I asked this question to Cook County Clerk Dorothy Brown last week. I'm going to address this question to you as well. It's easy to file a restraining order on an individual. Again, some people are getting unnecessary records because of restraining orders that are costing the county millions of dollars. What is your office plans in doing something about this culture of behavior that is costing the county huge amount of money, as well as the state?
So I don't have context for that. I mean, when I have people who are coming asking for restraining orders, they are coming as victims of crime. My job is to represent those who've been victimized by crime. So I don't know the context of where you're saying that they're costing a lot of money, because we use them in our domestic violence cases. We use them in some of our juvenile cases, and I've seen the people who come and ask for those. And generally, if we are supporting them getting those restraining orders, there's a basis for having to do so and having to go before a judge and make the case for them. So I'm not sure of the context.
The context of the question, there has been many restraining orders that's out there that's causing people who are falsely accused, and they've been prosecuted, and that's still on their record. It's hard to get a restraining order off your record, and it's costing them. They can't get a job because of that on their record. And what they're saying is there concrete evidence. Instead of a woman saying, he's stalking my Facebook page,
I mean, and I hate to sound, every time I come on here, I feel like I'm being overly lawyerly. But I don't think, it's tough for me to answer questions broadly, because case by case basis. And you just don't get a restraining order because you ask for one. You do have to go before a judge and make the case, and the judge makes the determination. Now, certainly, we want to make sure that people who are not found, guilty or have done something are not penalized by the process. We also want to make sure that people who have been found guilty, we've been in favor of some measures of expunging records so people can get jobs and, again, reintegrate into the community. That means that we have to be in support of that too. But it's hard for me to answer questions about, because I'm not saying that there have not been those abuses. What I'm saying is my job as the prosecutor is to make sure that we're not asking for restraining orders where there's insufficient evidence to do so, that we're not penalizing people when there's no basis to do so. Again, my job is to seek justice. And justice means, advocating for victims, but also means not making sure that we aren't penalizing people who should not be penalized.
Any upcoming events that you have coming up?
Oh boy.
Of all the tough questions,
I know, because I have my calendar in front of me. Listen, we are continuing to go out and meeting with constituents throughout Cook County. As you say, we were at the Richard Boykin had one over in Austin a few weeks ago. We were in Evanston a few weeks before that. Yesterday I was in Dalton. So we are traveling the county and meeting our constituents where they are. And so what I would say for people who are interested in sitting down and asking questions with burning issues that they want to address with me, to reach out to our office and get us on the calendar. I think those are the best events that we're doing right now, is going out to the community and meeting people and hearing their concerns.
What is your website?
Our website is cookcountystatesattorney.org. cookcountystatesattorney.org. You can follow us on Twitter, CC States Attorney. Yes. And it's all new. S.A. Kim Foxx, Foxx with 2 X's on Twitter. And we keep it updated so people can find us 24 hours a day.
Now, there's a real question here that at hand that I did a little investigation.
All right.
You were on the show last year, and I quote, "I will do the Shamrock Shuffle with you.
Okay.
You have my promise. I will be there." Running outfit on, so forth and so on. And lo and behold, I have registered.
You have?
Yeah, I have registered. You, young lady?
I have not. But let me be clear. It is on, I believe it's on April 2nd.
Yes, April 2nd.
I will be in New York. I'm part of a group, Prosecutors Against Gun Violence, who is convening in New York from the 2nd through the 5th, working on initiatives related to just what we were talking about earlier, gun trafficking, guns on freight, with the New York District Attorney's Office, the LA District Attorney's Office, and prosecutors from across the country. Given the concerns that we have in Cook County around gun violence, I had to be there. Now, so I had to be there.
Okay.
But I'm up in the ante, because the Shamrock Shuffle is only 5 miles.
Right.
But the Soldier Field 10 miler is 10 miles. And I ain't ran in 2 years. But because I'm a woman of my word, I was.
Facebook.
Oh, was I? Yeah, see, I don't even have Facebook anymore. I don't remember what I said. But I'm gonna talk. I'm now going to up the ante, and register for the Soldier Field 10 miler, which is double the distance. But I got another month and a half to prepare for it, so that I can show you that I'm.
Oh, wow.
So I can back up,
Okay.
So when they write the
I will be
editorial,
there. I'm
you will
already
see me.
registered for the Memorial Day.
I will register and send you a copy of my receipts. I'm gonna show you the receipts.
Any boxing lessons that you've taken thus far?
I haven't. It's funny you should mention that though, because this is a really high stress job. And I was doing, maybe we talked about this last time I was here, I was doing some boxing before when I worked as chief of staff, and it kept my head clear. And I think I need to get back in the gym.
I don't want you to think of me as that punch.
That's why you mentioned it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It's always a pleasure
Thank
having
you.
you on. Don't be a stranger.
I
Come
will
back on the
not.
drive
I
at 5.
promised you I would, and I did, and we'll be back.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you so much for coming. And thanks to Earl Winfrey, our executive producer, Rio Ray Harris, who is up next with Straight No Chaser, and Wanda, who is behind the scenes. Thanks for everyone, and thanks to your press secretary who wielding a baseball bat behind the scenes and not crowning up.
You have the right to defend yourself.
Right, exactly. See you guys next week. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful week.
Good job.
You guys want to take some pictures? Sure.
Good job. I have a question.
Yes,
I want to
sir.
ask you a question. What's the status on the Van Dyke case?
Is it up in court tomorrow? It's up in court.
What's wrong?
Yeah, there's a special prosecutor on that case.
Okay.
So we don't have it. The state's attorney out of Kane County is prosecuting Van Dyke, and then Patricia Brown Holmes is prosecuting the other 6 officers. And I think they're still in the grand jury.
Okay, great, thanks. Great interview.